Failure is a mindset, in my opinion. I could have said, you know what, I didn't make it through. Okay, I'll quit. I'll go out and get fleet and never make it back. I'll just give up. Well, that's quitting in my eyes. And that's not how I was wired or designed as a kid, because I saw that the struggle, nothing lasts forever. And once you find that step in that right direction, you keep making those steps. You can face adversity or failure, but it's not over. You can still take another step in that right direction.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazzo, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with the SEAL. Today's guest is a retired Navy SEAL with 22 years of service. Today, he is the executive director of Beyond the Brotherhood, a nonprofit dedicated to aiding transitioning Navy SEALs. He runs two businesses on top of the nonprofit, TriVet LLC, which provides specialized ankle strengthening devices, and Hit the Surf, which focuses on team building and leadership development for various organizations. He prioritizes family and community, reinforcing his commitment to personal and professional growth. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to introduce you to Sean Murphy. Sean, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Gina. I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and have a good conversation with you.
I need to get into the mindset of a guy that not only is so committed to his family, but runs a nonprofit and two businesses after 22 years of service as a SEAL, because that is just next level. And first of all, I want to get into all of it, and we have an hour show. So I'm just going to dive right in. Let's just go right to the beginning in terms of you deciding to be a Navy SEAL, because you gave 22 years of service. So to me, it was like, this is something you possibly wanted for a while. So when did you know you wanted to be a SEAL, and what did you do to make that happen?
That's kind of an interesting story, because back in 2000, right around 2000, was when I was on this journey to find, what am I going to do with my life? I was going to college, and I had a pretty unique upbringing. I was extremely poor. There was nothing really that was set for me. And while I was in college, I was in Army ROTC at the time, because I thought, oh, cool, I can go and wear a uniform and do something with my life. At that time, there wasn't a lot of books or media. Like, at that point in my life, I was so consumed with, I wanted to play football. In college, it was starting to be very obvious that I was not going to the NFL. How bad I wanted it, it just wasn't going to happen. There wasn't anything I could grab a hold of to say, this is what I want to go do. And so Army ROTC had given me some sort of structure, and it was cool because I got to wear the uniform. And I saw the way that people would look at you while you're wearing a uniform around a college campus. I went to these things called Ranger Challenges, and it was really cool because everybody worked together to do like a one rope bridge where you crossed across a creek with just a rope and some tools. And you got to carry things. I got to learn how to shoot guns, which I loved, just because I grew up in the country and we shot guns. And so I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. Well, then I ran into a certain situation where I saw, like, there's good leaders and there's bad leaders. And I saw a guy talk down to somebody that was very degrading and demeaning. And I kind of was like, I don't know if I want to do this. But I knew I wanted to do something in the military because I loved the uniform. I was studying criminal justice. I wanted something in a uniform because I felt like a part of a team. I was seeking some sort of acceptance into a community that was looked at very favorably. In all honesty, I had no idea what a Navy SEAL was. I went down to what I was going to join the Marines, and the Marine office was actually closed. It's probably the only time that it was closed. And the door next to it was the Navy recruiting office. So I was like, well, I don't know much about the Navy. I grew up in Oklahoma. Never saw a Navy person, never saw the ocean. So I'll walk in and see what they have to offer. Open the door, and I kind of told them what I was looking for. I was like, I really want to be part of a team. You know, I've played sports my whole life. This is kind of what I'm looking for. And they put on this, it was a VHS. So that shows how old, one, the video was and how old I am, I guess, as I'm getting. They put it into the VCR, and it was like the oldest Navy SEAL video. It was all grainy, and it was probably the one JFK approved back when he helped construct the SEAL teams. And there was these guys coming out of the submarines, and they're swimming, they're running through what now is Coronado Buds training. I didn't know that back then. And it just looked really interesting to me. And there's the SEAL teams, but he kept trying to pitch to me like the Navy and this is a journey. You get to go see all these great places, the beach and all this. And I'm like, oh, that does sound pretty cool. Never been to the beach before. The video stopped and I said, well, what is that? And he's like, that's the SEAL teams. And I said, well, what is a Navy SEAL? And they kind of chuckled. They didn't take me seriously. Like, you probably won't make it. Nobody makes it through buds. And we'll get into like why that kind of irked me a little bit. I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's what I want to do. And they're like, well, you can't do that because you've got to go through this physical screening. You got to do all these things. And I was like, well, how do I do it? I want to sign up. And that's really all I needed to hear. I didn't know anything about it. I'd never read a Dick Marcinko book. I never read any of the Navy SEAL. There wasn't anything out there. I don't even think, no, Charlie Sheen had made the movie, and I'd never seen any of these things that are very common today. That was the beginning of my journey of, okay, I got to find something to do. So it's not that I, like a lot of people today, had all this material that they could say, I want to go do this. It was just simply me trying to find something to do with my life. And I walked into that office that day and decided that, well, I guess here I go. I'm going to go join the Navy. And I did. I went to the delayed entry program and had 6 months to prepare because I had to finish out my college that I was going into debt trying to accomplish. And so I finished that out, joined February of 2001 and off to the races.
Two questions I want to know. One is, if they would have been like, you're never going to make it, would you have, like, if they would have been like, oh yeah, you can do that, would it have been a totally different mind, like you would have been like, oh, okay? Or was it like, because they said you can't, you were like, no, I definitely got to do it now? And number two, how was your swimming? You never seen an ocean before.
Oh, that is a fantastic question. My swimming was out of fear. As anybody, like I used to go to the lakes and go tubing and stuff like that, but it was never any structure, never been a swim course. So the swimming was what you would expect it to be. It was terrible. I was not a good swimmer. I remember being in the lake, and if I got out too far, I would get scared, and then I'd have to come back because I was like, oh, my feet can't touch. I'm coming back. But going back to your question, that if they would have said, oh yeah, you can totally do this, I don't know. It did something to me, like when, I guess it's because of, being a punk 19, 20-year-old kid, of you being told you can't do this. Well, most kids are going to, I think of what my kids do today. If I tell them not to do something, especially my daughter, she's going to go do it. It's like I gave them the idea to go do it. So I think that may have been kind of at that point in my life. I was still a little immature, and probably now that somebody tells me, oh, you can't do something, well, one, I'm already interested. And two, you tell me not to go touch that hot surface. Oh, well, I'm going to go touch that hot surface. And that's kind of, I think, what it is. So I don't know if they would have said, yeah, you could do it, if that would have changed my mind. Because once I committed to it, I was committed. Because again, I was looking for structure. I was looking for something to make of myself, because I felt that I wasn't accomplishing anything in the current path that I was on. So yes, I think I still would have done it, but I wouldn't have had the same fire that started that day. The fire grew, but that day was the match that started the fire.
So then, it's not like you just go to buds, right? There's a whole process through all of it, which people sometimes don't understand. And what I want to know is, how did you prepare and know what to do? I mean, you didn't even know about the SEALs in general. So how did you prepare and know, so you set yourself up for success? Because, if you don't know anything and you don't know that it's a process and you can't just go to buds and there's this test and this and that, and you have to be passing, well, how do you prepare for something that you don't know anything about?
Ignorance is bliss. I signed up for the delayed entry program. I started doing some research. I tried to figure out, well, what is a SEAL? And I learned more and more about it. Not as much as I think that I could have, because to me, the one person, his name was Roger Roberts. He was a chief at the recruiting depot in Kansas City, because I was in St. Joseph going to Missouri Western at the time. And so that was the closest station. And the recruiters there connected me to him, because I told him, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. They were like, all right, well, there's a SEAL recruiter that's designed for SEAL candidates, because you get a contract. They sign you for a contract. At that time, you still had to sign up for a regular Navy job, because there were so many people that would not make it through from the time that you signed up to the time that you graduated BUD/S. There's so many people that didn't make it through that you had to have some background or job too. Well, I went and trained with Chief Roger Roberts at the time, and it wasn't like he did a lot for me. He did teach me what the side stroke was, which is what you use in BUD/S. So I got to learn the basic concept of you actually have to have your head underwater when you're swimming so that you can glide through the water and learn to get into a rhythm and use your legs and not just your arms to try and like grit through it. So I did a little bit of the swimming and stuff with him, but again, I was playing college football and we were doing 2 and 3 days. So I was in really good shape. That's really what I had to focus on is swimming and trying to get into shape. But again, it wasn't enough. And I think that the comment I made earlier, the ignorance was bliss, was probably the best thing for me. So I didn't overanalyze and overtrain myself to get into the wrong mindset going into BUD/S.
Okay, so you get into BUD/S, right? And
Mhm.
I'm just fascinated with the swimming part of it because they say second phase. It's like everyone focuses on first phase, but second phase, you're in water this
Yeah.
entire time, right? So I mean, ignorance is bliss, but it got to get you through the through this 50 meter, like no breathing and all this other stuff that you guys end up doing and stuff. So let's put a pin on that. Let me start the first phase. We're there, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about the mindset that you had going into it. Let's talk about some of the lessons that you learned throughout. Like, was it shocking to you as everyone was quitting? Did you find that motivating? Was there something that made you like doubt why you were there? How did you overcome that stuff? Well, talk to me about that.
First day I show up and you go and you check in, you get your camis and all that stuff. And so now I can still remember the smell of the beach, the seaweed. And so that's the first time that I got to look at the ocean that I'm about to go spend 6 months. And at that point, I knew it was the world's hardest military training that you could possibly endure. And a
So,
lot of people
before
quit.
we start, I want to know what time we're in, what time of the year.
This was, oh, that's a great question. It was class 238. I started. It was, I think, at the end of summer.
Okay, I just want to be painted. I want the whole picture as you're telling the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, it was end of summer because I didn't make it through BUD/S the first time. I went through 3 classes and they got injured and had to come back, which that's why I say ignorance is bliss. Not knowing what I was truly getting myself into. Remember, I hadn't seen any videos. I didn't know all the details about first phase, second phase, third phase, the big test of Hell Week. Actually, the first time I ever swam in the ocean was in BUD/S, swimming through the surf.
Wow.
I remember that smell, and that smell will never leave my brain. For some reason, I remember that. It was, we were tortured in that surf zone. I hear the waves. But the first time, and this is actually something kind of funny, is there's a group of us that you get to have a roommate, and you're in these barracks that there's 4 people to a room. It was an old building at the time. I think they've redone everything because it was over 20 years ago. But you get a couple of guys in a room, and we had this brilliant idea of, well, if we're going to be surf tortured, that's where everybody quits. Let's go practice. We went down in the middle of the night, and there was a couple of us. We went and laid in the ocean and surf tortured ourselves. The dumbest thing you could possibly do. If somebody's out there thinking about going through BUD/S, don't go do that. You're going to get enough. There's no reason to do it. But it was like we were anxious, excited. You had that Christmas morning feeling of running downstairs to go see what's out there. Well, don't worry, BUD/S is coming. It was the dumbest thing that I laugh at myself now of like I was way too eager to jump in that ocean because I was afraid of it. And one in the back of my mind, I was kind of scared because it's a big scary thing, the ocean, and not having ever swam in it. And now I've got to go swim through the surf zone that I had never experienced the power of the ocean of these waves just beating you to death and then pushing you down. And here I am, I'm about to go and learn how to be a Navy SEAL, or at least train to be a Navy SEAL through this torture device called the ocean. It was interesting that when I showed up for first phase, like I said, ignorance was bliss, but it also got me into doing some really stupid things like surf torturing yourself before you actually went and got surf tortured.
That's actually really funny. But I get it. Like, I mean, that it's funny though, because it does make sense the way you're putting it. You mentioned that you went 3 times, right?
Yep.
Through buds. So which did you go through first phase 3 times, or where are we at?
I've actually done 5 total classes. I did a team building event for a NASCAR team, and it was the first time I lined out my career for somebody. These were some awesome guys. They were just curious, and I'd never actually set it down. So I was in class 238, went to Hell Week. It's actually funny that I had a conversation with another guy that we just onboarded to be on the Brotherhood as a fellow. He was in the same class and actually was in the same boat crew when I got my first injury. He's a taller guy. He played football. His name is Noel Sons. Awesome guy. And it was me and him in Hell Week. Anybody that knows anything about buds, the shorter guys are the Smurf crew, which is the best, boat crew out there because we're awesome. And then you had the Green Giants, which were all the tall dudes that were our nemesis because, well, they think they're great because they're so tall. And you never really get to be in the same boat crew, but it's usually those two are the competitive ones that are winning races. Well, this instructor had this great idea that we're going to eat our MREs in the ocean, like sitting down with the boats on top of our head. The difference was I remember him saying, like kind of being in pain and leaned forward. And what that did is that dropped the boat on my head, which it compacted my spine. It was like a shock of lightning went through me. And so I pressed forward because we're about to go through the med checks. And I got pulled out of I think this is night 2. I can't remember exactly which night. But they pulled me out of the med checks. I told them, I was like, yeah, I've got this lightning bolt feeling going through my legs. And so they pulled me out and they're like, hey, we've got to get x-rays. And I was like, okay. And so they went and they did x-rays and they said, oh, there's no broken things in there. So they went to put me back in. Well, at that point in time, and this is where Buds is very, very structured, is they said, you've been out for too long, because I had to go over and get x-rays at this medical facility. And they came back and said, no, we're going to roll you to the next class, which after being up to Hell Week, it was like, oh, crap. Okay. Not very happy, but I can do it. I can get here. I know I've tasted where I know I want to be is I want to make it through this training. And so went through 239, same thing, went up to Hell Week, got the stuff called VGE, which is venereal gastroenteritis, where everything's coming out of your body from every end. They rolled me again. And so that time that was a lot. That when I got rolled that second time, that crushed me because I'm like, man, I just did this twice. Why am I not making it through? Like I started questioning and doubting myself. It's like, am I not supposed to make it through? Do I have weak genes? And that's the common thing that we say to each other. And so in 240, I had put so many miles on my body that it was starting to break down. I didn't know at the time was bilateral hip stress fractures, where you get the little hairline fracture in your hips. And I had 2 of them. And so I was running down the beach and we just had a guy pass away during a run. And I remember seeing him collapse and pass away. Right before I started Hell Week again, we do a 4-mile timed run, and I was on a timed run and I couldn't walk. Like it was the weirdest thing. Like no matter how hard I tried, it's like my legs wouldn't work. And so they sent me over to the medic, and that's when they sent me over to get x-rays again. They said, okay, you have bilateral hip stress fractures. You can't continue. You've had too many chances. We've got to send you to the fleet. I was just devastated, heartbroken. I was like, well, I guess I'll never make it as a SEAL. They opened a door for me. They said, okay, because I was somewhat well liked. I always gave it my all. There was never a time that I'm like trying to feel sorry for myself. And so they said, you can come back if you go and do this billet, which is in Puerto Rico. You can go and be a 95-45, go and learn your job as a gunner's mate in a security department. So I said, awesome, I'll go heal and come back. Came back class 250, got all the way to Hell Week again. I was in Hell Week and they had an admiral that was visiting, and he was touring Hell Week, and we're in Hell Week. And this is where I met some of the greatest dudes that have walked the face of this earth. Like a lot of the guys there that I met in this time frame, I'm still friends with today. So I'm in Hell Week. I'm sitting on the podium. We're doing our med checks. This is day 2. No, this is day 3 after I've been through 2 nights. And it's right before you have like Wednesday night if you make it through Wednesday night, you're good. Like they'll roll you for it.
Yeah.
And so I'm close to that point, and this admiral's walking through it, and the class had VGE again. Like it's like the entire class had it. Well, I'm sitting on this podium and the admiral walks down, and this is why I don't like Skittles to this day. One of the brown shirts that already made it through came up to me and said, "Hey, Murph, you're doing great. Here's some Skittles." Like it was a reward. And so I'm like, cool. gobbled some Skittles down. As soon as the Admiral gets me, he's like, "Hey son, how are you doing?" I was just like, "I'm doing," and then I just projectile vomited Skittles everywhere. And I think that it got some on him or something because he was like, "Get that man to medical now." And I was like, "Oh no, I know what this means." Basically, he put one of his aides to say, "Make sure you find out what is going on with this guy." Like he had probably never seen somebody the way that I did, but I was like, "No, I'm okay, I'm okay." And I was
Oh,
in medical, and they kept telling me, "It's like, hey, you've got to hold down some liquids or fluid or else you can't go back in." I'm trying to find every way to hold stuff down. And so they would give you Ensure, the drink Ensure. I was not holding it down very well. And the doc there was really cool. He was a really nice guy. We'd become friends. And he said, "Hey, Murph, listen, you've got to hold this down or else I can't let you back in. One more chance. This is your last chance." I was like, "Okay." Drank it down. I was like, "Hey, can I just go to the bathroom real quick?" And he's like, "Yep." So I went to the bathroom and I was like, maybe if I just let it go now, I can come back down. There's nothing to throw back up. And so I went back, basically purged myself. And I came back out and I was like, "Oh, I'm good." And he kind of looked at me and he shook his head. He's like, "Hey, just so you know, everyone heard what you were doing in there." And I was like, "Ah, crap." He's like, "We got to roll you." So I got rolled into class 251. 251 was a magic ticket. Not a single problem, went all the way through, made it all the way through. And I was like, the amount of time that I'd spent in buds was just awful. My body was so broken down by the time I got done that I still have, I used to be about 5'9". Now I'm about 5'7" because the boats had just pounded in. And that's why I've lost part of my hair, is because the boats have rubbed all that off. 'Cause I spent so much time underneath a boat in
oh.
buds.
So
That
what
kind
is
of,
that, like 4 hell weeks essentially?
it was, yeah, yep.
4.
Four. There was, I think I've totaled about 13 or 14 days being in Hell Week.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
it was,
Wow.
it
And
was rough.
okay, so what I want to know is, at any point were you like, you know what, I just, I mean, I know you said, the second time or something, that's when you were like, oh, do I have weak genes? But then that fire that you had, that
Yeah.
that kept you wanting to go, like, where did that come from? Like, how did that get developed?
Well, so I'm going to take you back to my childhood on that one. And I didn't realize this at the time. As a kid, I had no idea what I was going through. I was extremely poor. I went to bed hungry and cold more times than I can count. That's what I thought of my child. That's still how I think of my childhood, was because my parents were extremely poor. My parents split when I was pretty young. And so I spent my time going back and forth between Arkansas and Oklahoma. I guess you can call I was disadvantaged in the eyes of society, but in really, like, that was my life. That's what I love, because every single thing that I had to earn. I had to go out and get it. I had to prove to myself and to others that I could do something. Going to school, sometimes I was always friends with every group of people out there. That I went to a small school, but they had their cliques. And I was friends with everybody in the clique. I respected them. I loved them, and everything that I went through was from like a disadvantaged perspective. I was so Here's a funny story about being how poor I was. The time when starter jackets were really cool. I got made fun of a lot because I had long hair. I was probably the smelly kid, but I embraced it. Well, if you had the starter jacket, you were cool in school. And so I really wanted one. I still have this zipper, but I got a Notre Dame. It wasn't a starter jacket. It was like the cheapest knockoff. My parents did what they could to provide. And so I had this jacket. Well, I wore it to school and I could not face being made fun of for being poor, right? So I'm older now and I'm starting to realize, like, yeah, I'm poor. I don't have the brand name things. We had hand-me-downs. So all my clothes had holes in it. And I got this jacket. So I was like, well, I'm going to fool everybody and put a starter zipper on this zipper. So there's a little clip-on thing. So it says starter. And so I went to school. Oh, that did not fly.
Mm.
People caught that right away because it's a different material. And boy, that made things 10 times worse. They're like kind of making fun of me. And so I had to like sit there in my own like doing and say, yeah, it's probably not the best thing if I try and fool people. Those challenges that kind of set me to where I needed to be on mindset. I've got to find a way to overcome things. I've got to find a way to make it through and not listen to the hype of what other people may say or society may put on people. I think about this a lot now. I could have been the person that amounted to nothing, that society places a label on these disadvantaged people that I was. I could have accepted that and embraced that to not work for something, not find a way out, not to persevere through these challenges. And if I hadn't gone through that, I think that I probably never would have found my way into buds, because I embraced challenge. I faced so much as a child growing up that it was a blessing. And I wouldn't change my childhood for anything. The way that I looked at, if I needed to have an entertainment like a bicycle or something, my parents probably couldn't afford it. So I had to go out and get it myself. I had to go out and learn how to fix a lawnmower, to mow lawns, and earn that money to go buy a bicycle. So those little things is what kind of opened the door for me to say, just because you face a challenge, like not making it through buds the first time, doesn't mean that you can't. It just means that you have to readjust. You have to find that way to embrace the challenge and not overcome to what you think is the answer, which is failing. Or failure is not necessarily, failure is a mindset, in my opinion. I could have said, you know what, I didn't make it through. Okay, I'll quit. I'll go out into the fleet and never make it back. I'll just give up. Well, that's quitting in my eyes. And that's not how I was wired or designed as a kid, because I saw that the struggle, nothing lasts forever. And once you find that step to in that right direction, you keep making those steps. You can face adversity or failure, but it's not over. You can still take another step in that right direction. That kind of prepared me for going into buds.
And then let's talk about phase two, because this is like we're swimming, right? So tell me about these. I'm sure you had struggles, right? I mean,
so by the time you make it to second phase, I'd already learned how to swim. I actually got pretty good at it. I had a lot of people that helped me, because you have a swim buddy. And so I got paired with a guy that had been a competitive swimmer. And so I learned from him, like kick, stroke, glide, to learn more about gliding than about just my old way of muscling through things. Like, no, it takes a little bit of finesse and actual gliding through the ocean. You're putting this force. So by the time you get to second phase, you better be good at swimming. If not, you're gonna struggle quite a bit. But second phase is more about diving. And here I am, like I was never the top student. I barely made it through high school. College was, if I showed you my transcript, it looks like somebody was struggling to say an F curse word, because I just had terrible grades in college. And so now I'm learning about Boyle's law, Charles Gay-Lussac's law, like about how your body responds to pressure underwater. That's when I think I already had made the mindset shift to absorbing as much as you can and not being overwhelmed with the amount of information that you're drinking through a fire hose. And I went through these challenges of in second phase, it's called pool comp. And it was very tough for me, because I always had a fear of drowning. Well, pool comp is designed to make you relax under an extreme amount of pressure underwater. Outside of that, this is one of the things that I do for underwater, not tying in my business now, is I show the difference between when you're outside of water, you can take a deep breath and learn to make yourself relax. Well, if you don't have that luxury of oxygen or doing that, it causes you a whole different set of stress factors. And that's what pool comp is doing, is simulating if you're diving underwater and you get hit by surf and you lost your air, are you going to be able to maintain your composure and solve that problem? And so work through the issues and find the source of oxygen. And that was something that I'm proud to say I made it through first time, every time through pool comp.
That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I have to credit that to my roommate at the time, because he actually made it through with me. We were in Puerto Rico together, serving, and we trained a lot together. And so I learned a lot from him on just composure and staying calm. And he was such a good guy. And he was my roommate in buds. And anybody that's been through buds knows that eventually, if you're a roommate with a guy all the way through, you're probably going, and especially second phase, you hate each other. We didn't really hate each other, but you kind of get irritated, if you're just was a unique dynamic. But I owe a lot to him, because the way that I learned to like stay calm and do things, it was kind of like focus on the task and not the problem. It is a problem, but the task is to solve that problem. If you get overwhelmed by it, when I'm underwater and I have no air, SEAL instructors are on the surface, and they're sharks. They're waiting for you, because you're swimming along with your tanks and everything, and they swim down and they hit you, and twist and turn you and tie your regulator in a knot, and now you're just kind of like waiting, and then they dive off, and now it's your time. Like, okay, focus. You're running out of air. Your lungs are burning. You want nothing more than to go get a breath of fresh air, but you can't because you've got to solve this problem. Can you maintain your composure and have the mental awareness to follow through your regulator, figure out where the problem is, and solve that problem? Because at the end, you will get that oxygen that you so desperately need. And you've proven that you can maintain your composure underwater, because that, you can feel the water, that you can't breathe in water, you're going to drown. And so that was kind of my fears, like, okay, I can either let fear control me and respond to that, or I can respond to how I talk to myself of staying focused. I got to solve this problem. Just relax. You can do this. Other people have done this. You can do this. Just get through it. And so that helped me out quite a bit. And I made it through full comp, which is it's a lot of hype. And that's with everything. Hell Week, buds. It was a lot of hype that if you let that hype control you, then, and that's with a lot of things in life. If you let the hype and fear control you, you're taking away of what you're truly capable of. You don't get to see exactly how far you can take things and what you can accomplish. And that's what I realized through many of these challenges and buds, is that you maintain your composure and have the why not me? I can do this, focus on those things, that you can accomplish a lot more than you truly think you can.
So it's just, as you're saying, the waters, it's so relatable to me. I grew up on the water, but I was terrified of the water, but I grew up in the water and loved the water. And it's just so weird. It's so weird that I'm so terrified of it. And I used to always be in the water. So when I was training with a SEAL and we had to do the surf torture, the first time we did it, like Coach Mack said, I saw the light go out in your eyes. Like I knew instantly, I'm like just terrified of the water. And as the waves are crashing into you, like I'm just crying and screaming like half the time, until I had to learn how to like calm myself down. And every single time it was like that. But it was funny too, because I used to go in the water all the time. Like I said, I love the water, but I would hum and I would sing. I would do whatever I could to calm my body down. It like never got better. Just learn to stay calm, because it's like the fear, you can't allow that fear to take over you. So like that was so relatable as you're talking about that. But all the stuff that you're talking about is really, really helpful and incredible skills that you strengthened and developed to succeed in business. And I want to transition now to your life after, because I mean, you had an incredible career, 22 years. You went through buds like 5 times. You had 4 hell weeks. I mean, this is like amazing. All the lessons and stuff that you learned and the stuff that you said that translate to an amazing business. Now, the one thing I want to ask you before we get into business, considering you run a nonprofit and your nonprofit is helping SEALs transition, did you have a hard time transitioning out? You just dedicated 22 years.
Yeah, it was scary. That's something that the more I tried to run from that, the more that it caused problems. The transition was challenging because I knew that I made a pact with myself, and that's with everything I do. If I get to the point to where I'm no longer valuable and I'm not in the right frame of mindset, I'm taking away from the legacy of the SEAL team. So I need it, because that was something that you take pride in, is the reputation that you have in the SEAL teams, but also what the SEAL team's reputation is. So I didn't want to take away from that, because I owe it to the men that went before me, that are currently with me, and the ones that come after. And so there was a point where I was getting burnt out. Had been going through so much. I was over at development group at the time, and development group has an op tempo that is just insane. It's nonstop. It's almost addictive, because you can find this avenue to go down very, very quickly and have something to do all the time. The best description that I got was, it was a playground for adults. Essentially, you can find yourself into anything you want. It's your journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so at this point in my career, I wanted nothing more at the time to be in my life, to be a husband and a father. And so as I was torn between, okay, the war's winding down, I'm doing stuff that is in leadership to where I'm so far away from the X, I have to now plan, prepare, and equip everyone to go and do great things. And so for me at that time, I love the growth aspect of it for other people to go and do great things. But now I'm almost at the point where I'm starting to question. COVID just happened. One of the things that I knew I was making the right choice to get out was, or to retire, was my wife, Annalise. She was pregnant with, it was our first child. She had a kid that I met who is now my son. When I met her, he was 2. And so awesome kid. Jack is an awesome, amazing kid that I love him to death. We were pregnant, or she was pregnant with my daughter, and COVID had happened. Well, the country hadn't locked down yet. And she came to me one night and said, "Hey, I need someone just to be with me." And I could see I was sleeping on the couch because she was pregnant and snoring. And so I had to let her get sleep so I'm not waking her up. And I needed to get sleep because I had to function at work. And she wakes me up. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I could see the look in her face that she was in excruciating pain. And she said, "I think I got trapped gas." And I was like, "Trapped gas?" Is like, "No, you're in pain and you're throwing up. That is not trapped gas. Let's just go to the hospital and figure out what's going on." And she was like, "No, no, no." Jack, bless his heart, comes in and is playing her favorite song because he could sense the fear, and he's like playing Queen on the radio. He's trying to help, calm the situation. And so I called my neighbor and was like, "Hey, can you watch Jack? I got to rush my wife to the hospital real quick." And he's like, "Yeah, no problem." Get to the hospital. The nurses are like, they're kind of calm. They're like, "Hey, no big deal. We're just going to check the baby's heart rate, make sure she's okay and mama's okay. Take off all of her jewelry." She's like, "Here's the thing. If we have to take her back to deliver the baby," and she wasn't due for another 2 months. "If we have to take her back and we can't get an epidural, like we may have to put her under. You can't come back there. We have to put her under." And I'm like, "Okay." I'm like overwhelmed. Like, this is my daughter and my wife. And as soon as like I get all of her jewelry off, she's like, "Oh, got the baby's heart rate. Uh-oh, baby's heart rate's dropping." And that's when everything shifted. It was like panic. And she's like, "Hey, just so you know, that mom is internally bleeding and the baby's heart rate drops and mom's heart rate drops, both of them could pass away." And I was just like, wow, that's not something I want to hear. And so they
No.
rushed my wife off and they said, "Sir, you can't come with us. We can't get an epidural. We've got to put her under. We got to get this baby out now." And so I'm freaking out. Now they actually isolate me in this room as they whisk my wife and baby off. And I don't know. I didn't get a chance to say, "I love you" or anything. And it's like, she's off in this other room. And I'm in this, I'm all by myself in this room for a couple hours. And I'm freaking out. Now I'm like reaching out to anybody I can, trying to text my boss, like, "Hey, I'm in the hospital. Something's going on. I'm not coming into work tomorrow." And he's like, "No problem." I'm trying to like just grab hold of somebody and be like, "Hey, be with me in this because I'm freaking out. I think my wife and my baby may be gone." And so I got to the point to where I run out, and there was just this poor nurse, and me being, a SEAL, that I'm very intense with when I'm focused on something. I was like, "Hey, you come here." I was like, "They took my wife. They said that she could pass away. And my baby daughter is like, give me some answers now." And they're like, "Sir, who are you?" And I'm like, "My name is Sean Murphy. My wife is Annalise Murphy. She's under, I don't know where she's at right now." And she's like, "Okay, calm down, calm down. So they've had you in this room for a couple hours and you haven't heard from anybody?" And I was like, "No." And so they was like, "Okay." I was like, "Do not put me back in that room." And so finally this doctor comes out and he's like, "Okay, listen." He had good bedside manner. He's like, "Hey, so just so you know, your wife is recovering right now. We don't know about the baby yet. We don't know if she was breathing or not, but we've got her in the NICU and they've got her intubated. So she got tubes in her. You can't go back and see her just yet." About an hour later, they start wheeling my wife in. So now I'm thinking the worst, like, "Oh, great. I just lost my daughter. I don't know if my wife is going to be okay." They finally wheel her back in and she's still under the meds. So she's a little loopy. It was so good to see her. Like, that was like such an amazing thing to see her. I didn't know what to do. So I just took a picture of her because she looked goofy. And I was like, I got to make light of the situation because that's the SEAL's dark sense of humor, is like, in a bad spot, you got to make light of it, right? And so I took a picture. I was like, "Oh, you look great, honey." So she's kind of like out of it. She finally comes to, and she's asking about the baby and was like, I really don't know. I haven't been able to see her. They haven't really given me much." Well, then the doctor that came in and said, "We don't know if she wasn't breathing. So I had to like intubate her, but she's breathing now. Heart rate stable. We've got to make sure that she wasn't without oxygen for too long, but she's in NICU. It's going to be some time. We've got to run tests on her before you can actually see her." I was freaking out at this point in time. Like, my wife is good. That kind of gave me a boost. At the same time, like, I want my daughter to be okay. We ended up finally getting to go see her and she was okay. And that's the day that the country went on lockdown. I'm now having to manage being in the hospital, seeing my daughter in NICU, not knowing if she's going to pull through or not, catering to work because I have a lot of responsibility at work at the time. I was running a fairly large group of people, both SEALs and non-SEALs, and I had to be responsible to them. And they're trying to help me out by saying, take care of your family. We understand that you're in a bad spot. That's kind of like, I knew I needed to be focused on family. That was kind of like God's way of saying, hey, here's your blessing. This is your sign. Here's your sign to be focused on family. Not that I was burnt out from the SEAL teams. I was burnt out, but I knew that I couldn't give it my all, my 100%. And that's something that I always wanted to do is, if I'm going to do something, I'm all in. I'm not going to be part way in, because like I said, it's the legacy of the SEAL teams. There's other people that depend on you to give it your all. And that's kind of our culture, is like, you don't halfway do things. You do the job and you do it as the best that you can. And that's what I want to do as a father. And so, and by the way, NICU nurses are angels on earth. Like, I saw what they did to bring babies that were even more premature than my daughter. My daughter was a little tiny baby, but there's other smaller children in there that pulled through. And these nurses, I sat in there every moment that I could and watched them bring these little kids back to life. But that was kind of the defining moment for me. Is like, all right, yep, this is my sign. This is where I need to be. I need to learn how to be a husband and learn how to be a father. Jack was a blessing to me. He taught me how to be a father. Like, when I met my wife, which is funny, I'm kind of getting off track here, but I spent a lot of time. She was in Seattle, I was in Virginia Beach. And so it was a long distance relationship, but I was so excited to go see her. And I'm also spending probably more time planning on, like, what am I going to do with Jack? Because Jack was so much fun to be around. And so I learned how to be a dad, take this plunge into not just going through being a Navy SEAL and then trying to be a husband, but now I'm like, I've got another little human being that is teaching me how to be a man, how to be a father. And so I'm learning it. And my wife was very good with saying, hey, you can't do this. You can't leave him alone in the near things, because he's going to grab it. And so I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I had to, all the guns and stuff that I had to make sure everything was secure. And so now I'm getting into dad mode of dad proofing everything. But going back to the transition. So this was the start of making the transition. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. Now I knew that I was so focused on being a SEAL for 22 years that I was a SEAL 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My part-time job was a husband and a father. And so there was tons of relationships that I had destroyed because I was a SEAL 24/7. That was my priority. Now I'm like, okay, I've got to shift and learn not to be a SEAL 24/7 and be a dad or a husband. Oh, and by the way, I've got to find a career. What does that look like? And I thought there was going to be this magical job waiting for me, that my resume from going from being Navy SEAL to the tier 1 unit, I'm going to have a job no matter where I'm going to be. But it wasn't there. It wasn't. You just don't jump into this career and now you're back at the same level that you were in the SEAL teams of being this top performer. The best way I can describe it is, I was running with the world's best at what they do. Everything they did, both SEALs and non-SEALs, the support, the caliber of individual that I was next to day in and day out was incredible. And now, being at this very fast-paced, high-performing organization, to where I felt like a toddler. I felt like now I'm in this world where I got to figure out this new language, this new journey, and how am I going to make ends meet? Was I financially savvy enough while I was active duty to save enough money to be able to have an impact for this next journey that I'm on, to provide for my wife and my kids? And the answer was no, I didn't. I was so focused on being a SEAL. There's a lot of guys out there that were a lot smarter than me, that were more financial savvy, that had that structure and discipline, which I did pretty well with saving money because I didn't buy a bunch of electronics, but we didn't make enough money to have a profound impact to give us what we needed to. When you go to retire, now you want to relax and you want to kind of wind down, but then you find you've got to work 10 times harder because it's vastly different in the civilian sector. For me, when I walked into this new world of, it's what you make of it. Nobody cares that I was a SEAL. They do for a story. That's great. But what can I bring to the table for them? And so it's hard for me to communicate that to anybody. I'm like, well, I was a Navy SEAL. I went to a tier 1 unit. I managed people. I did these, I think of, I'm going to date myself here, but that Office Space movie is like, I take the problems to the customer. I'm a people person. That didn't go over well. It's like, well, I'm looking for somebody that's got experience. And I'm like, well, I have experience. Like, look at what all I've been through. It's like, that doesn't relate to them. And I'm not saying that it's not valuable, but to them, I couldn't bring that connection forward to them because they're looking for a certain criteria. And I've got to communicate that to them. And I didn't know how. And so that was overwhelming to me to see, okay, I've got to uproot my family from Virginia Beach, that I've got a stable community. I've got amazing neighbors around me that were there for me constantly. Now I got to uproot from that over to where I live today in Arkansas. I have to reestablish next to my family to find that the medical that I need, the all the little things like schools, where am I going to work? Where am I going to how's the cost of living? Like, where's that routine that I was in that was established and almost cookie cutter? Like, I can move from San Diego to Virginia and find my place very easily because we have those resources. Well, now you got to go out and find those resources and develop those and detach from the daunting task of taking everything you've done in the military, packaging it up for your disability claim. You've got to start separating yourself from the work, which is very, very hard for me to do because I was like, I want to work and be a Navy SEAL to the very last day, but you can't. You have to disconnect. I had to let go and give it off to the people that are very capable because they're now doing amazing things. I'm so disconnected from that. But I had to let go and let them do that so I could take that time to focus on all the amounts of paperwork to get through the not just the medical piece of it, but your drawing a blank here, my service record, all the things in your service record, making sure everything's documented correctly. Because once you get, and this is something that I had a great mentor give me before I started my retirement. He had just retired. He was a neighbor of mine that lived down the street. And he said, Sean, what you're going through right now, just remember all those active duty people, they have never been through retirement. So they don't quite understand what you're going through. And I was like, oh, it was perfect because I realized that I was just, once you're on your way out, people are kind of like, you're low priority now. You're not part of the mission. We're so mission focused that you're low priority. You've got to go do all this work. And you're like, well, I've had departments that could do all this work for me. How do I do that? And so now I'm just learning all these new things of scrubbing my records, everything that I've done in the military, and finding a way to capture it so that when I do retire and get out of it, all those benefits that I thought were going to be automatic they're not automatic. You got to go out and do the work to get them. And so all those things I struggled with trying to manage my time, disconnect, be a husband, be a father, find that next chapter of my life that's going to provide the same value that the SEAL teams was going to. And to that point about that value, there's nothing that's going to be as fulfilling as walking in every single day to be around the best group of people that you'll ever be around in your life and doing something that has such a huge impact on not just our society, but other societies out there when you go and you're able to be a professional. There are things that are going to find joy in, but nothing is quite like being a SEAL. And so I discovered that now is very, very scary to me as I'm transitioning is like, well, how do I find something I can at least enjoy doing? I think I know what I want to do. I think I want to go into this career field. And at the time, I was doing an internship through the SOCOM Care Coalition. And it's great because I got to do an internship with Tyson Foods, which I'm so blessed to do that. But I realized right away is like, this is not going, it was about a week that I was like, this isn't good for me. I'm not going to be a good mindset. It's going to be taking away from me, which is also going to be taking away from my family, which leads down some very, very dark paths. I wanted to be able to bring my best self home and also bring my best self to work. And there's got to be a balance there. And I wasn't finding that balance in this transition. I was struggling because every single day that I would walk into the SEAL teams, I was around people. It was filling my cup. I didn't realize it, but just even the little nuanced things that annoyed me were also filling my cup because you could joke around with these guys and girls and just have the best time. You could come into work and be like, in a bad mood, but you leave because of these little interactions. I can go work out. I can go to the shoot. I can go now and like manage a project and get a bunch of things done because everybody's working together for the mission and doing such a fantastic job at everything they do. So you're getting these little victories that you're not realizing it's work, but you come home fulfilled. And so I wasn't getting that in my transition. And I was like, there's got to be a change. When you're in the military, you have the commands are focused on getting you deployed, getting you ready for deploying, finding you work, and getting you back home safely. That cycle. Nowhere in there is the command leaders. Their job is not to find your next chapter in life for you. And that's on us. And that's truly where, going into Beyond the Brotherhood, that's truly where I found that it was filling my cup and fulfilling me, that let's establish that. Jimmy and I find a way to bring value to those people. These are great people that we screen and select, that we can connect them with these leaders of industry that can help guide you into an industry. And in a quick thing before we get into Beyond the Brotherhood too much, there's another guy. The way that we designed it was Jay Harrison has an assessment called Game Change. And what he did for me was, as I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to be good at? What do I need to focus on that is going to make me, have that intrinsic value that I'm seeking? And he did this analysis. And at first, when he gave it back to me, the reason why I was struggling is because I was beating my head against the wrong door to get in. When I got his analysis back, it said head football coach, chief learning officer, director of sales, and some other things. And I was like, first I was like, crap, we got to do better for our guys. I didn't believe what the assessment said. And so I was like, hey, Jay, you got to, and he's a former hockey player, a professional hockey player. He played in the NHL, turned sports psychologist. And so he only deals with professional athletes and us. Like, we're unique to him. And so he was ready for what I was saying. And he sat me down. I was like, look, Sean, you enjoy, he's like, it's not that I'm telling you to go out and find these jobs. What I'm telling you is there's a common ground here. All the traits, the characteristic traits that you scored very high on, relate to these things. And the reason why, and this is where he goes into depth and coached me through this, is that during your transition, you're trying to find this job in like global asset protection, security, which you're going to do great at. You will be phenomenal at, but it's not going to fulfill you. It's not going to make you happy that you need right now. You have a passion for watching or helping people learn and grow, helping them be at their best. He's like, if you would understand that, then that would help you find that next chapter. And I can help you find that next chapter. And this is when I'm the executive director of Beyond the Brotherhood. I was like, you know what? I thought back in my career that the single most rewarding time of all the cool things I've got to do, the best I ever felt was when I was training assaults, training close quarters combat, house clearance to the West Coast SEAL teams. As an instructor, that was, as I got to see these new platoons, new guys, and even older guys come together as a team and be just phenomenal at what they do, that was so rewarding to me. I was like, I love this. I see the growth these guys have, and they're going to go off and do great things. And I help contribute to that. I help facilitate that. And so that was rewarding to me. And that's where that transition piece really started to improve for me, is because if I hadn't found that, I could have found myself in some job that eventually it comes to a head of, if I'm not happy and now I'm bringing that home and now I'm not happy at home, well, that can lead to some very bad places, especially for somebody that, for 22 years, I had been a SEAL. That's all I knew for my adult life, just be a SEAL. And so how do I rediscover Sean Murphy? Sean Murphy, and I tell this to guys all the time, the SEAL didn't make Sean Murphy. Sean Murphy made the SEAL. And the same thing for those guys. You were that person, and then you got to go do something great. You proved that you have what it takes to go do that job. Now you got to go and do yourself again. You got to be yourself in a different capacity and do that same greatness that you have within you to go conquer that next horizon. And that's where we're trying to provide that avenue. And that's really what happened to me, is I had to learn to let go of being a 24 hours a day, SEAL, husband, father, and now person that can find growth and lessons in my own work that I had and bring that to other people. And that's what I absolutely love doing now, is just finding that reward of, hey, if you can help people, that's what does it for me. That other people may be something completely different, where they have a passion for technology or electronics or mechanics, something that could find value to them that they can now pursue and be happy and be the best at. And I think as an employer, like for me, if I'm looking at somebody that can embrace the job and they're going to do very well at and love, now I get to spoon feed that to these employers, and you get to see the growth, and we get the feedback all the time. It's like, this is amazing. Like, these guys are awesome. We want more. And so that's where it's like rewarding to me now through that transition period of hitting that wall of like, who am I? Like, what am I going to do? And it's scary. And I know one thing that I had a conversation with one of the fellows was the imposter syndrome, where you feel like, I don't belong with all these people. Like, they know so much more. And it's like, no, you do. You just need to manage your expectations. The problem that we had in the SEAL teams, which I found in the transition, was we have unrealistic expectations because we had the most capable people that were constantly in support. Well, now if we have we want everything to be done perfectly and at the best that you could possibly do in a very short amount of time frame, because that was the demand on us. And so now this demand is self-imposed. You feel like an imposter, being like, I've got to learn everything. you're surrounded by subject matter experts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leverage that now. Be the leader and leverage them. Like, you don't have to know every little detail. Leverage that. Lean on these subject matter experts. It's basic leadership. And so that kind of like reshapes your mindset of during the transition. Is like, so many people that we have are great leaders that are capable of that. We just got to now help position them, because they've got to stay focused on the mission. And then now it's our turn to, okay, let's help you focus on your next mission so that you can detach and be properly aligned with where you need to go.
As a father, as a husband, as a business owner, 2 businesses, and a nonprofit executive director, which is owning a business, what lessons do you think that you learned? Like, what was like the biggest lesson that you think has helped you to find success in what you're doing?
I have to start in buds. Every day is a struggle. When I was in buds, the log PT, the 4 mile time runs, the IBS surf passage, it's just like everything in life. You could hype yourself out. The mindset of how you talk to yourself, you're not going to succeed at everything. You're not going to be the best at everything. You want to be. And how you get there is the way that you approach everything. We lost a ton of races, but we also won a bunch of evolutions. And so when you learn that there's growth in the failure of, if you didn't win a certain evolution, if that day was hard, it kicked your butt, there's an end. It eventually ends. You just got to try your hardest, try your best. And eventually you get to a point to where when you find failure or you make a mistake, we're very hard on ourselves. Instead of letting that overwhelm you, that as if everyone's looking at you like, oh, you failed. Well, the quicker, and I actually have a course that I teach in my team building events, it's called What's Next. I can relate it to when I taught CQC or assaults, is when you're going through a house, it's just like life. You can make one entry and it could be the best one, the absolute best. You did everything perfect. Success. You found success. There's more rooms in the house. There's more work that needs to be done. You have to find, well, what's next? And how are you going to approach what's next? Let's say you go into another room and you made mistakes. It was terrible. You made mistakes. It doesn't mean that the work stops. It just means that you've got to not let that overwhelm you and continue to function. You have to find that next step. You have to find what's next, because there's work. You can say, oh, I had the best room clearance, and then I went to the next one and had a terrible room clearance. Well, that next one could be another awesome room clearance, or it could be another one. But bottom line is, in the bigger picture of things, you still have work to do. There's still more rooms in the house. There's still more. You've got a bigger goal in mind. You've got to focus on, don't tell yourself, oh, I screwed that up. And now you give away that precious resource that you can never get more of, which is time. You take that time and you focus on how to be positive. That's what I learned very early, is that your brain is like magnets. There's a positive and a negative. If you let your brain go to negative, you're going to stay there. It's going to grab a hold of you, and that's the path you're on. But if you go to positive, then now you can find that positive, and you're on a trajectory that's better. That happens in such a fast rate, a fast cycle, that when you look at what's next, you can either wallow and feel sorry for yourself, which will eat you alive in the SEAL teams. You won't make it through buds. And if you do make it to the SEAL teams, if that is your mindset, you will find yourself on your way out pretty quick. The way to find what's next is embrace whether success or failure, to learn and grow from it. What did I do right? What did I do wrong, and why? And if you continue that cycle, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be positive on this. That is where that single lesson learned of, you can either say, oh, poor me, or you can say, why not me, and go find success. And that's what I found was one of the most powerful lessons that I learned early on.
So what do you think we should be doing on a daily basis to, you know, get through those struggles that are daily?
Instill discipline. So I don't mean this in a bad way, but just because skipped a dessert doesn't mean that you have discipline. It's a good start, maybe, but you can pat yourself on the back, but it's that long-term discipline. So find these little small things in your life that if you try and overwhelm yourself, maybe you're the type of person that you do trying to eat an elephant in one bite, but take one little bite at a time, one small step. If it's waking up, don't hit the snooze button. Say, I'm going to wake up, and I'm going to wake up on time. I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to get a workout in. I'm going to go and read a book. I'm going to spend 5 minutes. Make it enough digestible goals that you can accomplish, and that becomes a habit. Now you're developing a habit. And so if you start these little small things, find something that you know is good for you, but you don't like to do it. Or if you do that, now you're starting to challenge yourself, because again, I go back to starting off all throughout my career, I learned that the more uncomfortable you are, the better you're going to be. Because if you get complacent and learn to be lazy by not pushing yourself just a little bit, it doesn't mean like go back to the stupid thing I did in Buds of like, don't go surf torture yourself, because that's not what I'm talking about. But find a way that if you're like, oh man, I got to go work out. Yeah, go see what that does for you. Go see how you feel from that point, and then take a mental note afterwards and see what it does for you. Because that uncomfort means that you're growing in some way, shape, or form. And so those are the little things that you can do day in and day out to develop those habits, to find a way to persevere through chaos. I hate to take too much more of your time. I'm going to tell you a little story about this NASCAR pit crew that I put through. So I noticed that their team, they're phenomenal. They went from like, they're mediocre to like, they're absolutely phenomenal. They're one of the top teams in NASCAR. They were good at what they do, but they didn't push themselves. Like, they didn't challenge themselves enough. One thing that I did was in my Hit the Surf, I can tell you why I named it Hit the Surf later, but in my team building
That
thing,
was a question I had for you, because I was like, I've never seen the ocean.
I'll get to that in a second. I'll do that next. But I bring a tub with me, and I fill it full of ice water. They were doing pit stops, and they were doing phenomenal. They're doing great. But I'm like, okay, this is in a controlled environment. Let's put some stress on them. And I would yell at them, do my little bullhorn thing, and get in their minds. But when I put them in their fire suits, what they wear on race day, and made them jump in the surf or hit the surf through that cold water and do their pit stop soaking wet, it was like challenging for them, because that's something they've never done. And I made it doing the pit stops outside in this thing. And Ray, their pit coach, Ray Wright, he's a LSU graduate that he's phenomenal. He used to be a pit crew member too, and he's the coach. And he was out there grinning from ear to ear. He's like, I love this. This is great. Not only was it challenging at first, but they're making these little small mistakes, and they learned that how to work through those small mistakes in that adverse condition. So I saw them, like, they're phenomenal. They're all these former college athletes or NFL players that are now in these pit crews. It was cool seeing them function as a team. And that was something that I love doing, applying a little bit of adversity or uniqueness to challenging yourself to break free from that comfort zone and find something uncomfortable that's going to make you grow and learn. So do you want me to get into why?
I need to know. I mean, it's
all right. So my whole thing is, when I was in Buds, the reason why I called it Hit the Surf was used as a form of torture. I had to change my mindset a little bit. You're out there and you're struggling. You're doing all these push-ups and you're going to failure and it's burning and you feel like you can't do any more and you're just getting punished. You're like, you drop down, you go get wet and sandy. So I had to realize that actually hitting the surf was an opportunity. I realized this when I would struggle through like an evolution, and we're all going to failure. We're all in this struggle together. And then when they would say, go hit the surf, it dawned on me, that's their way of saying, yeah, we all see you sucking. You're failing at everything. Go do something different real quick to recalibrate yourself to come back and try again. And that's exactly what I realized when I would run out into the surf zone. Even though as bad as it was, my body had cuts and bruises and scrapes, and I would get all wet and sandy and stuff like that. But hitting the surf was the second I had that, I was sweating, like my head was hot. my lungs were on fire. Everything was like my muscles were burning. But as soon as I hit that water hitting the surf, it was like that feeling of that cold water rushing over me and it relaxed me. It was like that hot air, I just blew it all out. And now I was like, oh, I've reset myself. I'm ready to go. It's like doing a cold plunge. Like you get out and that feeling, you're like, oh, that cold water just zapped me and put me in a different
Mhm.
mindset. And so that's exactly what I felt every time. And now it's a new race. Now it's a race to get back to go get my butt kicked again to see if I can be in first place then, get that small little victory. So I was like, what a great way to try and bring that to anybody else that is out there that wants to go through one of my courses. Like, let's help you reshape your mindset. And that was what it meant to me. And so I was like, all right, hit the surf. That's what I'm going with. And I owe that to a good friend of mine, Austin Dillon, who's a NASCAR driver. He's the one that actually said, you should do this for a living. You're actually pretty good at this. Eric Warren, Mike Dillon, his dad, like there was this group of people at Richard Childress Racing that were like, hey, you should do this. And they kind of encouraged me, like, I was still
Mhm.
active duty at the time. They're like, hey, you should do this. I formed the company and it's been doing great ever since.
Okay, so with this company, do you do like individual? Do you do business? Tell me a little bit about, do you have events and workshops? Tell me about that. Then I want to know too about Beyond the Brotherhood. Do you do fundraising, events, things
Yeah.
like that?
The for-profit company, I do a lot of team building for professional sports. I do professional bull riding. Those guys are awesome, which is a lot of fun. I've done it for corporate events to where they'll bring me in and I'll do a team building event. I love, there's one event that I've done several times, call it the minefield, where I blindfold people. And it's all about communication. You learn a lot about how you communicate when how you talk to somebody, how you learn to receive information, the feedback you give them. I do stuff like that. I've done keynote. I'll do certain topics that people want me to come in. I've done diversity, equity, inclusion. I've done mindset. I've done. I do a lot of really. It's just I'm going to go back to mindset. It's a lot of the mindset. It depends on where they're trying to go. Like they'll tell me, "Hey, we've got a team that we're trying to form. We want them to form together. They never really work together as a team. We want them to understand a little bit more about the importance of teamwork." And so I'll do that. And it's really about mindset. I also work a lot with law enforcement because I earned my master trainer specialist while I was teaching assaults. And so I love law enforcement, first responders, the people that are holding the line and helping people in their community. That's what I want to be involved in. So I'll teach like SWAT teams and stuff like that, how to do house clearances and get them some training. I've done night vision training with them. But a lot of what I do, like, for example, I'm doing another talk for Veterans Day, not on Veterans Day, but before that is if they want to bring me in, I want them to do a match donation for their company for me to come in. I'll do the talk, but I want them to raise money for Beyond the Brotherhood. Something that's an easy lift for me. I do want my travel to be paid for because my time is valuable, and it's hard to leave my kids that I really wanted to be home, with. And now I see if I travel, I do travel a lot now, but I don't want to miss, key events with my kids and my family. And so those are things that I
Mhm.
balance out pretty well. Beyond the Brotherhood for fundraisers, we've got quite a few coming up on our website. We've got an events page that we just put up so that people can find out, and even on LinkedIn as well. You can find out through LinkedIn. We've got one in Houston called Veterans Day Shootout, where it's you get a team of four. And this is what we like to do is the SEALs that we screen and select of high character. We have these individuals that are now looking for a network because they didn't have one when they're mission focused. You know, on social media, you have all these things. So now we build these fundraisers to where we pull them in and get them into these unique environments to where it's a mutually beneficial thing. So if they go to this event with a team of four, and everything is the 501(c)(3, so you're donating to get your spot to now go to this event, do some shooting with rifle, pistol, archery at this gun club, but you're paired with a SEAL, and now these SEALs are going to get to know you. You get to know them. You get to see where they want to go. You get to learn more about it. It's a really in-depth event to where you get to learn more about these individuals, not just the SEALs, but I like to see how they break down barriers, the communication barriers of some people don't truly know what questions to ask because it's, like I said before, it's a different language you're learning. And so these eager leaders of industry, these executives that have so much knowledge, and so does the SEAL. And so we pair them together in these events. And we have a triple S one where it's another really nice one out on the West Coast in St. Louis Obispo in December that you get to do shooting, driving. A lot of it is really just networking. All of our events are based around kind of networking it helps us raise money, but you also get to meet these people instead of it just being this blind thing. We want you to see the people that you're helping. And it's not just the SEALs. I look at it as going back to why we started Beyond the Brotherhood was, I had a very close friend of mine that was a mentor and coach that took his own life. And that left me with a lot of questions of why. And I see the families, I see the people that it affects as well. And it's not that guys struggle with mental issues. It's more, well, they do get to that point, but at the same time, it's for us to be able to think of helping out the SEAL, but you're also helping out the families as well. They're human beings. They're these great, and that's why a lot of guys screen is that they want to help give back into the community. They want to stay connected. And now we have not just the SEAL community, but we're building the community outside of these executives, these company owners, these people that really truly care and patriotic, that now they're part of this new community and we all take care of each other. Like the people we've partnered with are phenomenal. They just love to get to know the guys, get to know us, get to know what we're about, our organization, and how we do things. But now they're connecting with other people as well across different industries. And so it's like building this very powerful community that we can reach into continuously. It's like what Jimmy May, our CEO, says all the time, is like we're extending the ladder down for guys, and our task for them is when they make it, when they get placed in society, they put the ladder back down for the next guys. And that's what these industry leaders are doing for us, is they're putting that ladder down, helping us out. And now they have a return. They have these awesome individuals that give back into their organization, but also help out, bring in other high-performing individuals. So that's kind of what our fundraisers are established around.
That's fun. They sound really fun, and your Hit the Surf and what you do, it sounds unique and different. You're not just a guy that's going in and speaking. You're getting them to learn a little bit about themselves. You're learning, how to come together as teammates and individuals. And it sounds fun, and the nonprofit sounds amazing. And anyone that's listening, you see all his contact information that I link. So thanks, Sean, for being here. It was a real pleasure talking with you. Everyone that's listening, please like, share, comment, subscribe, give us a rating, become a Patreon member so you get access to our bonus episodes that only our Patreon members get. And thank you all.